keynote speaker, Captain William Toti. A little bit about him. He served in the United States Navy for more than 26 years. He was the commanding officer of the USS Indianapolis, SSN 697, Submarine Squadron 3 in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and Fleet Anti-Submarine Warfare Command in Norfolk, Virginia. He is a survivor of the September 11, 2001 attack on the Pentagon, and his narrative on that day, titled Antoinette, was included as the opening of the 2006 National Endowment for the Humanities book Operation Homecoming. He later served as a defense industry executive for more than 15 years and is the author of the 2022 book From CO to CEO, which is a practical guide for transitioning from military to industry leadership. He was involved in the 2000 exoneration of Captain Charles Butler McVeigh, who was the commanding officer of the World War II cruiser USS Indianapolis CA-35, and he currently serves as the co-host of the very popular YouTube podcast, The Unauthorized History of the Pacific War. He has been featured in several documentaries to include The Lost Ships of World War II, which aired on Fox, USS Indianapolis, The Final Chapter, which aired on PBS, USS Indianapolis Live from the Deep, also on PBS, 9/11 One Day in America, which was on the National Geographic Channel, 9/11 The Pentagon, which aired on the History Channel, and 9/11 Inside the Pentagon, which was on PBS. So please join me in welcoming Captain William Toti.
We gather here today to remember service members who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Now, over the years, I've interfaced with hundreds of Gold Star families, those who have lost family members to war and conflict, and they never quite feel worthy. I never know exactly what to say. These days, I spend much of my time, as Ms. Bowers said, using my podcast to tell the stories of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who served in World War II. And as we lose more and more of those heroes each day, it's important to remember them. It's more critical every day. And as difficult as it is for me to find the right words today, there was one speech where I was just a bit more intimidated. In 2008, I was asked to honor the fallen veterans of the Battle of Iwo Jima at their reunion. Every year, someone would understandably talk about the Marines at that reunion, but that year, the Navy vets of the battle wanted somebody to say something about the sailors' service and sacrifice on Iwo. I thought about the various stories I could tell. There are thousands of them. But I settled on the role of the 300 sailors, mostly underwater demolition team frogmen, the precursor to today's Navy SEALs, who surveyed the beach before the Marines landed. Ernie Pyle once described those frogmen as half fish and half nuts. Under a continuous barrage of artillery and mortar fire, those brave men suffered horrific casualties. Over 2/3 of them were killed or wounded by the end of the day. Now let that sink in. 2 out of 3 of the frogmen became casualties, a story that has been substantially underreported over the years. I have to tell you, I was very proud of that speech. That was right up until the point where I arrived at the reunion to actually give the speech, when I was introduced to the man who would be telling the Marine Corps story that day. His name was Woody Williams. So you see, I had been asked to talk about the Battle of Iwo Jima opposite a Medal of Honor recipient from the Battle of Iwo Jima. It was a setup. But in the years following, Woody and I became great friends, and I acquired an even greater appreciation for those who failed to return from that battle. But Iwo Jima was just one battle of hundreds in that war, and one of thousands over the course of this nation's history. You know, a recent survey indicated that, as I said earlier, something like 75% Americans don't know what Memorial Day is supposed to be about. They think it's for picnics and barbecues, discounts at the shopping mall, or a weekend at the beach with their friends and some beer. They've forgotten, or worse, they don't care, that today is supposed to be about honoring our war dead. It's about remembering the people who sacrificed their entire futures so that other Americans could have the freedom to spend this weekend at the beach. I wear a bracelet with John 15:13 on my wrist. Jesus said, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down his life for his friends." There's been a lot of great love in what our American patriots did for us. And during that war alone, over 400,000 Americans paid the ultimate sacrifice. And over 1 million Americans in all of our wars through the course of history. World War II proved that there is such a thing as objective evil. Modern day culture would try to convince you that morality is relative and that evil is determined by some subjective human standard. But that's a lie. The objective standard for good and evil is determined not by the wavering whims of some academic in Ivy League, but by our Creator. And despite the revisionist history that would try to convince you otherwise, America is a force for objective good in this world. One of our special guests here today, the one who's already been introduced, knows that truth firsthand. World War II veteran Cam Pelletier. Cam, would you raise your hand again? So born in 1922, Cam joined the Navy in 1942, and yeah, do the math, you've already been told, he's 102 years old. Thank you so much for being with us today, Cam. We're so proud to be here with you. During the war, Cam was assigned to the 33rd Construction Battalion the Navy calls the Seabees, and served overseas at Guadalcanal, Peleliu, Green Island, and Russell Islands. His mission was to build airfields so we could better fight Japanese imperial forces through the Pacific. This sailor and his fellow Seabees often performed their duties under fire. Incredibly, Cam's unit lost only 12 men during their campaign. Cam, we are so grateful for you and your fellow World War II veterans, men and women who quite literally saved the world. All of our World War II heroes were Depression era Americans who possessed less, yet sacrificed more than any generation since the Civil War. Men like Marine Sergeant John Basilone, who received the Medal of Honor at Guadalcanal, then volunteered to go back to combat duty and was killed on Iwo Jima. Or Airman Lieutenant Dean Hallmark, who was executed after being captured by the Japanese following the successful Doolittle raids. Or Army Private John Reese, a Cherokee Indian from Oklahoma who was killed in action in the 1945 assault on Manila. Or the entire crew of the World War II submarine Wahoo, one of the most successful submarines in world history, but was sunk with all hands in 1943 in the La Perouse Strait north of Japan. But if you let me hop across the Atlantic for a moment to the European theater of operations during World War II, I want to conjure up a scene from that phenomenal movie, Saving Private Ryan. You will recall that in one of the scenes, the Tom Hanks character, as he lays dying, says something profound. After losing his entire unit trying to save Private Ryan, the Tom Hanks character looks up to the Matt Damon character and says, "Earn this." He's telling Private Ryan to do something with his entire life to earn the sacrifice that his soldiers made on his behalf. He was, of course, talking to another soldier. But when I watch that movie, I see something entirely different. Those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and every one of them since World War II, didn't just sacrifice for the Private Ryans of the world. They sacrificed for each one of us. So I don't just see Tom Hanks saying, "Earn this" to Private Ryan. I see him saying it to every American. He's saying, "Earn this" to you and me. Because their sacrifice has allowed us a sad form of freedom, the freedom to forget. The freedom to forget about all the suffering our fighting men and women have done in all the nation's wars. The freedom to forget about anything else that's happening in the world in the present day, so we can be distracted and consumed by the latest pop culture lunacy. In short, we honor today the men and women who laid down their lives so we could have a grievous freedom to forget about what this day represents. Have we earned this? No, I don't think we have. Even worse, I think we've failed to learn from this. And each time we risk new wars by failing to learn the lessons of old ones, we disrespect the service and sacrifice of the men and women lying in this cemetery, as well as all the others we honor here today. We hope for peace by entering into a fit of fantastical, wishful thinking, but the peaceful world we long for continuously eludes us. But we still have time. We have time to recover. We have time to honor. We have time to return our attention to the meaning of sacrifice, to ensure that these hard-fought battles have not been fought in vain. Abraham Lincoln once said, "It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they so nobly advanced, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion." So that's how we should dedicate ourselves today, to the unfinished work of peace. But that peace will require strength, so that these fallen will be the last Americans ever to be asked to give their last full measure of devotion. God bless the service and sacrifice of our fallen heroes, and God bless America. Thank you.